This is Philosophy Bites with me, David Edmonds.
And me, Nigel Warburton.
Philosophy Bites is available at www.philosophybites.com.
Philosophy Bites is made in association with the Institute of Philosophy.
For philosophers, almost no subject is off limits to scrutiny. In Philosophy Bites, we've discussed the philosophy of humour, of friendship, even the philosophy of wine. Today, a topic that's been investigated by philosophers for 2.5 millennia: love. Is there anything in common between the love for another person and the love of philosophy? Between the love of friendship and the love of wine? It's not immediately obvious that there is. But Simon May, visiting professor at King's College London and author of a recent book on love, says all forms of love do have a similar basic structure.
Simon May, welcome to Philosophy Bites.
Thank you.
The topic we're going to focus on is love. Can love be defined?
Well, many people these days say that love cannot be defined, and indeed that to try to define it is to denature it or to undermine it, to destroy the very thing you're trying to define. And I think that that is just a local view, that is a residue of late romanticism, which set great store by feeling and believed that feelings were undermined by thinking about them.
So you're saying love can be defined?
I am saying love can be defined. Indeed, love has a long history of definition. For most of its history, if we go back to Plato, for example, or even pre-Plato, to Greek thinkers like Empedocles, love was very much regarded as susceptible of definition and was defined.
So within philosophy, it's also been a major topic of interest. It's not just that it's been defined, it's been the focus of serious philosophical thought.
Yes, for most of Western history, that's the odd thing about people thinking it's not definable now. It was really central to Plato's philosophy, to Aristotle's ethics, obviously to religious philosophy, to the philosophy of thinkers like Augustine, Thomas Aquinas. Plays a major role in the thinking of, say, Spinoza in the 17th century, of Rousseau in the 18th century, of Schopenhauer in the 19th century, and of many others. So it's really a very, very recent idea that love can't be defined. And of course I'm arguing that that's nonsense.
Just to get clear, we're talking about love in general, not specifically erotic love between two individuals.
Yes, many people, of course, would say that there is no such thing as love. There are different forms of intimacy, different forms of attachment, different forms of desire that get lumped under this one word, love. But I don't think that's the case. I think there is one such thing. And there again, I wouldn't say I was in any way unique. If you'd asked someone like Plato, he would have said that there is one thing called love, of which the different things that we think of as love are constituents. For him, for example, love is our desire for the beautiful. It's our desire perpetually to possess the beautiful. In fact, to be more specific, love is the desire perpetually to possess the beautiful that we don't have, that we lack. Plato articulates two different views which have remained very powerful. One of them is the one I just mentioned, which is that love is this desire perpetually to possess beauty, going up a ladder of beauty where we get to absolute beauty, which is the beauty in which everything, all individual beautiful things in a sense participate. And that is a beauty that is in a sense beyond this world. It's certainly beyond time and space and individuals. It's like the God of beauty. And that's one view he puts forward, but he also puts forward another view, which is that love is the search for our lost other half. So love is the search for wholeness, and he puts this view into the mouth of the comical poet Aristophanes. And we still talk today about love as searching for our other half and leading us to a sense of completion. In fact, I argue that all love is in a sense both a backward movement and a forward movement. So all love seeks in its very structure to reclaim a lost past. And all love also moves forward to a future completion.
What do you mean by that? If I love somebody, in what sense am I looking for the past?
Well, I think there are different ways in which this can get expressed. For example, in the 20th century, we have a perfect expression of this, which is Freud's view that love involves regression to childhood, a situation in childhood in which we were perfectly safe at the breast of our mothers, and that drive within love is to repeat an earlier form of security. And I argue that that is just another way of expressing the metaphor of Plato, that love is a search for a lost and necessarily mythical wholeness. One reason why love can never be fully and stably fulfilled.
So that's the backward-looking element of love. What's the forward-looking element?
The forward-looking element is that, again, which is something that I think people would identify with from their own relationships and so on, is that you think of love as taking you to some form of higher good in life. Now, that higher good has been conceived in very different ways. In the modern era, it's been conceived in terms of actualizing your potential, becoming the person who you are, discovering your inner world through a relationship with another. In the ancient world, it was considered more as becoming an ethically good person, becoming a virtuous human being, developing your excellences of character. We obviously live in an era of the inner world, of the subjective, of the individual. So the way we cash this out, as it were, is in terms of an inner development, a development of my inner world. In a society where that mode of thinking hadn't developed, it was regarded more as a way of developing generally regarded excellences of character, or a general search for the higher good. In religion, you see this metaphor cashed out in terms of a search for God, coming to God. There's the idea of the ladder of love. You climb the ladder of love towards your ultimate goal, which is God. And that is also both a future-oriented thing, because we live our life, or as it says in the New Testament, the world is a bridge to God. So the idea is we move forward to God, but in coming to God, we're also moving back to our source and creator. You can see also in the religious context how there's this dual movement. So the movement forward is also, in a sense, a movement back.
I can see religious love as having that form. But in more secular terms, love, is it really about developing oneself? That seems like the wrong sort of motivation, certainly, for love. That if the reason why you love someone is in order to become a better person yourself, you're not really loving them, you're loving yourself.
If you ask people, why is love a good thing, or what has love done to you in your life, they will say, well, I feel I've come to myself. Knowing Sally or knowing Johnny has made me feel that I have come, in a sense, home to myself. I actually argue that all love is motivated by something that we want and is to that extent self-interested. But once that's something that we want has been given to us, it unleashes this tremendous desire to give to the other who holds out this promise. So I don't see any conflict of principle between self-interest and altruism in love. If you look back in history, it is absolutely central to Christian theology that we love our neighbour for the sake of God. I mean, that is a classic formulation. In fact, there's something even blasphemous about loving your neighbour just to give to him. You love your neighbour for a higher sake.
Is it fair to say that what you're doing is analogous to what Nietzsche was trying to do with morality in general when he said that there isn't a God, God is dead, but we can't just carry on as if he was still existing?
Well, I suppose since Nietzsche was actually my first great philosophical inspiration, as you know, my second after Montaigne, it's almost impossible not to be influenced by one's philosophical parents. And in a sense, I'm trying to do something similar. I'm saying where he, for example, said that values like pity, that we carried on both valuing these values and using them as if we were still living in a Christian world, but actually we weren't, and so they had been torn from the context that alone gave them any sense. I suppose I am saying the same for love, but the difference is that I want to vindicate love, whereas Nietzsche did not necessarily want to vindicate the values he attacked, like pity.
So you want to vindicate love. What is the concept of love that will survive this kind of analysis?
In essence, I'm arguing against the dominant conception of love, which has been a Platonic one, where Western philosophy really has been just a footnote to Plato through the Platonization of Judaism and Christianity. And that essentially says that love is inspired by and seeks the good and the beautiful, as, for example, embodied in God. And I'm saying, no, we do not love as many things as we find beautiful. We do not love as many things as we find good. In fact, notoriously, we can fall in love with people who are to others incomprehensibly A, ugly, and B, bad, and something else must be at work. And actually, love is about something quite different. And I'm arguing that love is inspired by the promise of an anchoring for your life. This is a mysterious thing. It's difficult to define exactly what these qualities are, but somebody who holds out the promise of offering you, as it were, a home in the world, giving you a sense that you can live your life such that you are now at home in the world, is somebody who you will love. Once that promise has been held out, that's when the altruism of love will kick in. That's when we will give everything, we will die for that person, we will pursue them, we will attempt to possess them. It's not through some moral goodness they have, it's through some sense they hold out that your life can be valid and can be rooted in the world. Many objects of love, like God, do exactly what I'm saying love does. What does God do ultimately? God isn't just a kind person. Both Old and New Testaments, contrary to what many people think, the New Testament is quite a violent document, and there are a great many threats of punishment and hell and eternal damnation and so on. And why do human beings love God? Because God is the ultimate rock and anchor of his people. Not because he is morally good. In fact, it's not up to human beings to say whether he's morally good or not. I'm talking about now within the religious context. There have been all sorts of conceptions of the object of love, precisely of the object of love, that fit my sort of description of it, rather than the Platonic or Aristotelian descriptions where the object of love has to be beautiful or has to have certain virtues of character. I therefore think I'm producing a definition of love that is actually truer to many of the objects of love and to many of the features that we know about love, such as its selectivity, than many of the traditional accounts of it do.
I can see that working in lots of enduring cases of love. But what about that kind of wild, passionate love for somebody who takes you away from securities, leads you into danger? Does that mean that's not truly love?
Well, I don't mean by security mere comfortableness or stability. I mean security is a sense of you being alive. People say, I feel alive when I meet that person. And indeed, the feeling of aliveness is one that might cause you to go off to the ends of the earth, to sacrifice career, to sacrifice family and so on. So I don't think that's inconsistent with my view.
Does this love have to have the possibility of reciprocity?
No, reciprocity is absolutely not needed to my concept of love. My concept of love applies to any object of love, and that could be a landscape, it could be a work of art, it could be love of wine, if I can put it that way. It could be, in other words, love for objects that are incapable of reciprocating your feelings, and none of us would want to say that that sort of love doesn't exist. We can fall in love with a work of art. There are people who fall in love with Wagner's opera Tristan and Isolde and, in a sense, are more obsessed with it than they are with human beings. We don't want to say that isn't love. So love doesn't have to be reciprocated to be love.
Is this purely a psychological theory, or is it a philosophical theory in some special sense?
Yes, well, as a Nietzschean, of course, I don't accept the rigid distinctions that you seem to be presupposing. So Nietzsche says psychology was the royal route to the important problems at this period in history in which we live. And to me, what I'm doing is what is often called these days phenomenological, which is I'm trying to look at the basic structure of our experience. In this case, an experience that we designate with the word love. There are concepts and elements to it that are psychological, but it is fundamentally about what is the structure of this experience that we call love, and has it been accurately analysed to date, and if not, can we put forward a better form of explanation for it?
Do you think your theory makes a difference in the sense that people will, if they embrace it, behave differently?
I do actually, which perhaps sounds a little bit arrogant. I mean, let me give you one concrete example. We say, it's very often said, that love is something unconditional. And I've explained, and I won't go through it again, how I think the idea of the unconditional comes from its religious origins that we've taken over. People in relationships, when someone does something that the other person doesn't approve of or didn't expect, they say, but I thought you loved me unconditionally, so I expect X, Y, and Z. Now, if we can get rid of the expectation of unconditionality and get to understand more what love is really about, then a philosopher can actually affect relationships and attitudes of people to each other in a daily sense. That's one example, unconditionality. So I think why all this matters is that, of course, it's very noble to think that we should be unconditionally committed to each other, but if that's not the way things work, then we are lumbering our relationships with unworkable expectations, which in the end are going to undermine them.
Simon May, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's now a Philosophy Bites book published by Oxford University Press. For more information, go to www.philosophybites.org.